Up next, the first of two live viewer call-in programs looking at the latest from the Middle East. Our guest is Rabbi Meir Kahane, a former member of the Israeli Knesset.
Rabbi Meir Kahane, former member of the Israeli Knesset, what's your reaction to the announcement by Prime Minister Shamir that he would pull some troops from the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, somewhat on the terms of the Camp David Accord?
I think that there's no question that this is the beginning of a retreat from those areas, and all those people who always said, well, Shamir and the Likud will, of course, never do that. Well, I also heard that said about Begin and the Sinai. I think it's a tragedy for Israel. I think that the voters of the Likud never expected this. And essentially, there really is, in the end, no basic difference between Shimon Peres and Shamir.
Put the current situation in the Middle East into perspective for us through your eyes and in looking ahead toward the new administration in this country.
I think that there's not the slightest doubt that there is heavy U.S. pressure upon Israel. I think that Shamir and the present government have accepted the fact that they will have to give in. I think that this will whet the appetite of the Arabs. I think that they sense that Israel is weak. It will not bring peace. It will only make things worse. And we are paying the price today for the terrible mistake in 1967 when Israel fought a war in which it was almost wiped out and won that war in 6 days and did not annex the territories. Those are our territories, and if they're not ours, then we shouldn't be there. And stop talking about them being liberated if you don't annex them. We should annex them because an Israel without that will be an Israel that faces a dagger in its heart. The PLO does not want peace. I don't trust them. People that began 4 wars with us does not want peace. They haven't gotten more peace-minded. They've gotten cleverer.
What's the bottom line with you? What do you do to take care of the Middle East problem?
You first of all begin to be honest. There won't be peace. If anyone ever gets on this show from Israel, whether from the left or the right, and says, I have a peace plan, throw him off the air. He's a demagogue. I want peace more than anyone else, than anyone who lives in Washington or in the States. I serve in the Army, and my children do. But there will not be peace there. The question is not peace, but whether Israel will survive. You annex the territories, you transfer the Arabs out, and I know that the world will be upset, and that's too bad. And then you have faith in God and a strong army. And that's the best that I can offer.
You have been, it has been quoted of accusing you as being extremist, controversial, even a racist. Are you a racist?
Of course not. But, you know, when people say, are you a racist, or what do you have to say to that? I don't have to answer every absurd, libelous comment. Defamation is the last refuge of non-thinkers. If you can't think, you call names. I'm not a racist. Why am I a racist? Any Arab who would become Jewish tomorrow is as Jewish as Meir Kahane. That isn't racism. What I'm talking about is a conflict between two peoples, each of whom believes that it is his country. When you speak about coexistence between Jews and Arabs, there isn't even coexistence today between Arabs and Arabs in Lebanon. And when people say I'm an extremist, well, one person's realist is the other person's extremist. I'm not an extremist. I think those people who see what is happening and don't do the things that I say have to be done quickly are the extremists.
Our guest tonight is Rabbi Meir Kahane. He is a former member of the Israeli Knesset, and he joins us to take your calls and comments. We'd invite you to join us, as you'll see the phone numbers at the bottom of your screen, and you can start dialing now. For the Eastern Central Time Zone, 202-628-2525, If you live in the Mountain or Pacific time zone, the phone number is 202-783-2727. We would also tell you that if you're watching us live on this Thursday night, we'll be joined in about 40 minutes with George Moses. He is president of the National Association of Arab Americans. Rabbi, you wrote in a piece that was published in the New York Times about a year ago now, there is a specter haunting Israel and its American Jewish supporters. It's called guilt. What did you mean?
We Jews, having lived for 1,900 years in an exile with no state of our own, and suffered all that we have suffered, have come to so much need to be loved that we feel guilty about everything that, whether we have done it or haven't done it. This guilt over the Palestinians. Guilt. Since 1920, they have attempted to murder Jews. This problem didn't begin in 1967. In 1929, the Arabs massacred 67 Jews in one day in Hebron. What was troubling them in 1929? The occupied lands of 1967? In 1947, they turned down the UN partition plan, which would have given them a state called Palestine, and a much larger state than it would have taken in more than the West Bank and Gaza. It would have taken much of what is now Israel. They said no. They went to war. They began 4 wars with us. And we feel guilty. The Palestinians would massacre us if they could. Now, if Jews feel guilty about shooting Arabs every single day, and if they feel guilty about beating up Arabs, then they should ask themselves, what is more humane? Doing what I say, transferring them out of the country into Jordan and letting them establish their own country there called Palestine, or doing what Israel is doing now? I have no guilt about saving Jews from a horror that the Arabs would bring on us. And yet there is this incredible guilt feeling that somehow we are doing things to an innocent people. They're not innocent. They never were, and unfortunately they never will be.
Born and raised in Brooklyn.
Yes, indeed.
When did you go to Israel?
1971.
And you recently have given up your American citizenship.
Well, I say no. The State Department says yes. It's in the courts now.
And you have been quoted as saying that you think American Jews should move back to Israel. Is that correct? Is that a correct quote?
I'm an Orthodox rabbi.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a politician. I'm a rabbi who's in politics. For me, everything that I say is Jewish law. It's Judaism. Judaism says that every Jew should live in the Holy Land. A special people, a chosen people in the chosen land. Yes, that's exactly what I say.
What happens now with this new administration? We talked a little bit about that before, but really what happens with George Bush as president in terms of your ideas and in terms of the U.S. relationship with Israel?
Well, there's no question that George Bush, just as the Arabs, senses that Israel is weaker, can be pressured. He will pressure Israel. There's no doubt about that. I think that Israel has to face a reality. It has to choose. Once upon a time, we were a people that believed in God, the Bible, and the burning bush, and now I would hope that we won't believe in George Bush.
You are no longer a member of the Knesset.
Unfortunately, I think I was the victim of an obscenity. I think that when a democratic country passes a law barring a party from running, that's obscene. What happens tomorrow if the Orthodox Jewish parties will suddenly, truly and honestly feel that atheist parties are a menace to Israel and bar them, or the right bars the left party, or the left bars them? Where does it end? I was barred, despite the fact, or perhaps because of the fact, that the polls showed that I would have gotten at least 8 to 9 seats in this recent election. So I'm a former member of the Knesset who hopefully will be in the Knesset again.
And you still lead your party?
Oh, yes.
And it's called?
Kach.
And what does that mean?
It means thus, or this is the way.
And what are you trying to do with it now?
I'm trying to become prime minister. It's that simple, because I really and truly believe that the things that I say may be difficult to hear, but it's the only way. I believe that the Jewish people has got to understand that if it doesn't do the kinds of things that I say, that the state of Israel itself faces the absolute apex of tragedy, and that is extinction.
First call for Rabbi Kahane is from Washington, D.C. Good evening.
Good evening. Rabbi?
Yes.
Good evening. We keep hearing in the media that the key to peace in the Middle East is the creation of an independent Palestinian state. My question is, if I remember my history correctly, from 1948 to 1967, I think the Arabs had total control of the territory in which they want to create a state. And they never created an independent state, nor did they attempt to create one, if my memory serves me. What does that, if my facts are correct, what does that tell you about Arab intentions?
Well, your facts are correct. And what it says is that the same Arabs who in 1947 turned down the UN plan, which would have given them a state, are not interested in just that. They truly believe, and let's give them credit for that, they believe that the entire country belongs to them. They believe that Israel has no right to exist. They believe that the entire area is called Palestine. By giving up what they once had, and they went to war, even though they had that, you will not bring peace. You will simply whet the appetite of Arabs who will then move on to the next phase, and that is, having gotten back the lands of 1967, let's get back the lands of 1947, which means wiping out Israel.
Durham, North Carolina, you're next. Good evening.
Hello, hi. Hello, Rabbi.
Yes.
I would like to ask you, I'm originally from Brooklyn, and followed your career and admired you for many years. And I was wondering, why do you think that in the United States there is an absolute obsession with what's going on the West Bank? I don't know how often you're in the States now, but there is certainly much more play of that story, with the injuries and casualties being nothing compared to other spots in the world, but yet it's a daily barrage of coverage on this story. And I was wondering what you thought the reason was, and if you think Israel can do anything to change that.
Thanks, North Carolina.
I think you're very, very right. Just 3 weeks ago, in Lebanon, you had a horrible massacre. 3 days of massacres between Shiites and Shiites. Over 180 Shiites were just massacred. I mean, with hatchets and knives in 3 days. I'm sure that over here, no great deal was made over that. In Algeria, just recently, a few months ago, there was rioting. The Algerian army went and killed 500 people. I don't recall anybody shouting and screaming, demonstrating. The Syrians, some years back, in Homs, killed in 1 day 15,000 of their own people. Now the question is, why do they make a big deal over Israel? Well, they may tell you that they expect Israel to be better. I think that's balderdash. I think that there's a tremendous amount of hostility towards Israel. It's a hidden kind of a thing. In fact, I think that in this country there's a tremendous amount of anti-Semitism, which, for various reasons, has been kept down. First of all, because the economic times have been good, and when times are basically good, people hate Jews quietly. I think that Israel, and especially the Six-Day War, gave the anti-Semites an opportunity to cut this albatross of guilt over the Holocaust away. And I think that with every passing decade, it's become worse and worse and worse. What I would suggest to you is, don't be worried about it, and don't be bothered about it. CBS is not going to decide the fate of Israel. Don't be worried about it. The fate of Israel will be decided by the Jewish people doing that which God wants and which is good for Israel. So don't be upset.
I've read where you have expelled German and Austrian correspondents from news conferences that you've held. Is that true?
We have a clear rule that anyone who represents the German state radio or state TV cannot appear at my conferences.
Why is that?
I don't merely throw out people. If I would have thrown out every news person in Israel whom I thought was hostile, we'd have an empty room. That's not the point. I think that what the German people did to the Jews is not a thing that one overlooks easily. I'll certainly have coffee with the same German personally on a personal level. But as long as he represents the German state, 45 years is too short a time to forget. And I think that one of the problems of people in this country is when they say, let's forgive, forget, I think that people who don't hate evil enough guarantee that it will happen again and again. So indeed, no official representative of German state TV or state radio can appear at any of our press conferences.
We have reserved a phone line for our international viewers who are watching us on WorldNet tonight. And if you'd like to join us, you can dial this phone number, 202-737-6734. That phone number at the bottom of your screen, again, reserved only for our viewers watching us around the world on WorldNet. Let's go next to Los Angeles. Good evening.
Hi. Rabbi Kahane, do
Yes.
you believe that since Muslims are also descendants of Abraham, that they also have a right to the land?
I think that if you're going to speak about the Bible, if you want to raise the argument of the Bible, then one has to follow the Bible. And in Genesis chapter 17, where God tells Abraham that he will certainly make a mighty nation out of Ishmael, who is the father of the Arabs, but the covenant, the land, shall he give to Isaac. So if you want to use Bible, which is fine, I mean, I'm all for that, but use it, and don't take it out of context. The Arab peoples have 22 countries, and I don't mind that. Don't begrudge them any of them. The Jewish people has nothing except Israel, and on that there's no compromise at all.
Northampton, Massachusetts, go ahead.
Yes, Meir Kahane, I wanted to say that I'm an evangelical Christian, and for many years we've been well aware that the State Department is not serving the interests of this country or Israel. And they are extremely unsympathetic to your cause. And I was just wondering if you had any comments to make concerning the general attitude of the State Department toward Arab-Israeli relations and U.S.-Israeli relations.
Well, I mean, there is no question that they've been hostile ever since Israel came into being. When Harry Truman wanted to recognize Israel, they certainly fought him. But again, that doesn't bother me. I think that one of the problems, if you're speaking as a Christian, as born-again Christian, I think that it has to be made clear that the State Department or the President or Congress were not created to do what is good for Israel. They were created to do what's good for America. It's important, however, for a Christian to think in Christian terms. That when God said to Abraham, those that bless thee shall be blessed, and those that curse thee shall be cursed, what is really being said is that what is good for America is to support Israel. But not because it's good for Israel, but because it's good for America.
Alexandria, Virginia, go ahead.
Hi. I would like to ask Rabbi Kahane about his suggestion to transfer the Arabs out of the West Bank. Obviously, the transfer will be done by force, because obviously the people of the West Bank are not going to leave from their own will. Don't you think that, one, you are amplifying even more the problem of the Middle East and taking the chances of peace out? And second, don't you think that expelling people from their homes go against the heart of the teachings of the Jewish religion?
Sir, when you say that if I were to do that, it would harm peace, or it would cause greater friction between Jews and Arabs, let me make one thing clear to you. I did not start the 1948 war, the Arabs, or the war in 1956, or in 67, or in 73, or the Intifada. The Arabs did. The Arabs hate Israel with a Kahane or without a Kahane. The Arabs believe that it is their country with a Kahane or without a Kahane. When you speak about peace, where in the world were you people in 1948 when Israel accepted the UN plan for partition? How come we weren't hearing peace then? And I recall the 3 weeks that preceded the 1967 war, and I watched on television in Arab capitals the Arabs marching and shouting, calling for Israel into the sea. Where was peace then? Look, this isn't a game. You think that you can start 4 wars with us, lose the 4 wars, and then come back and say, let's have peace? Give us land? I'm all for land for peace. I'll have the land and you'll have the peace, and it'll teach you a lesson. Don't start wars again. Expelling people from their homes, if the Arabs would have won, and if the Arabs win just one war, you will see an extermination of Jews, quite similar to the kinds of things that we see almost daily in Lebanon. You want to talk about coexistence between Jews and Arabs? I'm waiting to see how Arabs and Arabs live together in Beirut. Sunnis and Shiites and Christians and Druze and Amal, Hezbollah. Everyone is mastering everybody else. And you talk to me about peace. In Judaism, we speak about peace, but we're not fools. We're not a pacific faith. We're people that want peace, but we're not about to have peace at the expense of Jewish survival.
Zula, Montana, go ahead.
Good afternoon. The rabbi, being born in Brooklyn, certainly knows the greatest example of nonviolence, or one of the greatest examples of nonviolence in this century was Jackie Robinson's fight to gain recognition in the National League. And I'm just trying to figure out how a man is intellectually superior to most others can reconcile his belief in violence with the nonviolence that the Old Testament and the Talmud teaches. I just find this totally incomprehensible. Thank you.
I do too. Incomprehensible that someone can get up and talk about the nonviolence of the Bible and the Talmud. Clearly you've never seen the Bible or the Talmud, or else you've been looking at a different version. Of course we hate violence. And of course violence is not a happy thing. But violence is sometimes a necessary thing. And if the Talmud says, if one comes to slay you, slay him first, that's not exactly out of Gandhi. Well, the Quakers, I don't even have to begin to recount the numbers of wars that Jews had to survive. I want all the nations to beat their swords into plowshares, that's for sure. But when my enemy has a sword, I don't want a plowshare. What kind of comparison between Jackie Robinson, who was fighting not against people who wanted to kill him, or exterminate him, he was fighting for a basic right, a civil right. And by the way, the basic civil rights that blacks got in this country would not have been gained without a great deal of real struggle, So, and even that was not against people who wanted to wipe them out. Even Bull Connor in Alabama was not talking about just killing blacks. It was a question of rights. I'm facing an enemy in Israel who wants to liquidate my state. What do you want me to do? To meet people who started 4 wars with me with flowers? That's not the Bible. It's not the Talmud, and more than that, it isn't even normal.
In 1968, our guest tonight founded the Jewish Defense League. He remained its international chairman until 1985. What's the Jewish Defense League do today?
I think it's not doing much, and it's unfortunate because I think that there has been a real rise in anti-Jewish feeling. It's not easy for a group such as JDL to find leadership. In short, any group which uses violence as one of its methods has got to make sure that it has the kind of leadership that can stop it from turning into a gang. Because violence, while it may be necessary at certain times, is terribly wrong at other times. And one has to have the intellectual stature to realize when yes and when not. And it is not easy. It's not easy finding leadership, and the lack of leadership led pretty much to the effective demise of JDL.
Bob's Fair, New York. You're next. Good evening.
Yes, good evening. The leaders of Israel in the past have come from Poland, Russia, Brooklyn, and basically they're not biblical Jews. They originated back with the Khazars around the Black Sea area of Russia. But as a result, they don't have any religious claim to that area any more than anybody else. There are Jews in Israel today that have Arab background, but they merely practice the Judaism as a religion and not biologically or ethnically Jews. And the second point, of course, is that the rabbi here is endorsing the exact policies that Hitler prescribed for the Jews of Germany, and that was to have them deported out of the country.
Thank you, New York. Eva?
Look, if you think that I am going to argue with you about whether I'm a Jew, the descendant of Abraham, you've got the wrong Jew. We're Jewish. We are descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the chosen people of the Bible. If you like it, fine. If not, fine. Eat your heart out. We're in the country. 58% of the Jews of Israel are Sephardic Jews, Jews who come from Arab countries. The comparison to Hitler is obscene, though not a surprising thing coming from an anti-Semite. Hitler, of course, that's exactly what Hitler did. He just took the Jews and moved them out of the country. He didn't gas them. He didn't burn them. There was no Holocaust. And of course, you're the kind of a person who would say, you're right, there was none. I don't want to kill Arabs. I wish them well elsewhere, in their own countries, 22 of them. I simply just want them to leave me alone in my one country. And I have no interest in debating you whether I'm right, wrong. For 1900 years, we had no state, and we lived under people such as you and enjoyed such wonderful benefits as pogroms and crusades and eventually Auschwitz. And thank you for everything, but we have finally decided to have our own country, which we will decide what's best for us, just as you decide what's best for you.
Buffalo, New York, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say that I felt that the comparison between the rabbi and Hitler was ill-founded.
I'm sorry, caller. I'm going to have to ask you to start over. We were having a hard time hearing you.
Oh, can you now?
Yes, I can. Thank you very much.
I was going to suggest that I agree with the rabbi on the fact that the comparison between himself and Hitler was ill-founded. I would say a better comparison would be with Khomeini. I think he represents the same kind of fanaticism that drives people apart. If I were a Jew, and I would be proud to be a Jew, they have a marvelous culture, and I herald that culture, but I would be embarrassed to be a part of a culture when a man continues, a man who's grown out of bitterness and ugliness, who oversimplifies every historical event. Whether Arab or Jew, this is wrong, and it doesn't serve the intellectual world or the spiritual world. Rabbi Kahane is a man without a spirit. who continues to repeat and repeat with his very sad eyes. And I think by doing this, he casts a shadow upon a beautiful people and a beautiful religion.
Thank you, Buffalo. We'll take it from
I'm
there.
embarrassed tonight.
Thank you very much.
One of the reasons why there is no Jewish spirit left, sir, in Eastern Europe is that because there are no bodies left. The Jewish spirit that you praise, and I'm deeply moved by your praise. I wouldn't know what I would do if I didn't have it. This Jewish spirit was wiped out in Eastern Europe because we Jews had no state of our own, and so they massacred 6 million bodies. What I'm trying to do is guarantee that that will never happen again. It's pretty easy sitting in your city and talking about love and spirit, and who doesn't want love and who doesn't want spirit. But I have to face people who for 70 years, since 1920, have been trying to massacre us. So don't throw around words such as Khomeini and so on. If you want to argue with me about facts. But don't call names, because one, it doesn't bother me, and secondly, it adds nothing to the discussion. Let's talk about facts, what the Arabs did to us, what they would want to do to us, and then what's your answer if you don't like mine.
London, England, you're next. Good evening.
Yes, good evening. I would like to commend Mr. Kahane for his work. But I have a question. I was in the Ginot Shomron in the West Bank 2 weeks ago, and I was struck at the fact that the settlers are very much armed in automatic weapons and the like, and they seem to have a kind of an all right attitude to the Arabs around. Now, my question is, what do you think of what's going on in the West Bank now with the settlers being armed as much, and whether you think there will be a solution with the threat of the Arabs around the settlements?
There isn't a day, not a day, in which settlers are not attacked in their cars by Arabs who surround them. What do you want them to do? To pelt the Arabs with flowers? They're living in a terribly dangerous area, surrounded by people who hate them. Every week, another one is killed, another Jew is killed. Of course they have weapons. Of course they have weapons. Now, what will be with the West Bank will be one of two things. Either, and this is whether it is Paris or Shamir, either they will be allowed to give up land, which will lead to a tragedy, or not only the settlers, but all sane, normal people who remember those terrible days of 1967 will get up and say, we will never allow you to leave that land. We demand the annexation of those lands, because that is justice and that is Jewish, and we want an exchange of populations. We took in 800,000 Jews from Arab countries. Let's now give them the Arabs from our country.
Seattle, Washington, go ahead.
First of all, Rabbi, I'd like to thank you for appearing on television. And I'd like to say that just sitting here watching you, that the picture you present and your honesty and everything, it appears to me you're a man of God. Not the same picture that appears in the press. I'd also like to ask you a question. You're a Jew and you're a practical man. How would you go about, in detail, I know you've done this 1,000 times, but how would you go about moving the Palestinians to a separate independent state? It would obviously require enormous amounts of money if the Palestinians ever agree to do it. It would require a great many things. And I wonder, could you just sort of outline, if tomorrow you were the Prime Minister of Israel, what would you do in detail a little more?
Okay, three brief points. First of all, I don't say that every single Arab has to leave. We offer them a choice, that any Arab who is ready to stay inside the country, as a non-citizen, will have full rights, full personal rights. All of his personal rights, his cultural rights, his social rights, and economic rights, and so on. But he will not be a citizen. He has nothing to say in our country, the Jewish state. If he will accept that, he may stay and live, and then we are obligated to treat him or her just as any other Jew. Secondly, the Poles and the Czechs in 1945, after World War II, expelled not 1 million people or 2 million people, they expelled 12 million ethnic Germans from their countries. People who had lived in their countries for 1,000 years, in Silesia, Sudetenland, Danzig, and so on. About 12 million people, because those people in pre-World War II Europe were a fifth column and brought on Hitler and caused untold agonies to the Poles and the Czechs. Now, the Poles and the Czechs didn't, after World War II, didn't sit back and say how to do it. They said, we have the force now, we have the power now, and never again do we have to suffer this. And they moved them out in a very, 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 very brief time, and the Germans went. They didn't fight because they didn't have the weapons to. If I were the prime minister, I would offer the Arabs a choice. If you want to stay, stay under those conditions. If not, you are going to leave. And I'm not asking you, I'm telling you. We would move them into Jordan. And don't ask me, but what if Jordan doesn't want them? Of course Jordan doesn't want them. But I don't either. And what in the world makes Jordan such a legal state, if you know its history? Let the Arabs move into Jordan and let them create any state there, any state that they want. Let them call it Seattle or Palestine or anything. And I'll be happy to help them.
What's your reaction to his statement that you are not the way you appear in the press? Or that his reaction to you?
That's probably one of the most important statements possible. I think there is an outrage that the news media is so unbelievably biased. The major newspapers of this country have not given me an opportunity to be interviewed in Israel, despite the fact that I was at the center of many, many, many things. Never interviewed me. I think that there is a very, very definite attempt to paint a certain image, and the news media do that. If they like someone, the image is just—it's an incredible thing. If they like Jesse Jackson, they'll overlook every anti-Semitic comment. They'll overlook the fact of his tax problem. They'll overlook everything if they like him. And if they don't like you, and especially if they're liberal and I'm not, which is true, they'll paint you with every incredible smear in every brush. I think that's terrible. A free press is free only if it's also a fair press.
Is it true in Israel as well as the United States?
It's even worse. At least here I can appear on television, radio, and so on. In Israel, when I was a Knesset member, for 4 years, I was not allowed to appear on state television and radio. It's much worse there.
Grand Haven, Michigan. You're next. Good evening.
Hi there, Rabbi.
Hi.
I'm pretty new to this subject, and I was just wondering if you could fill me in and explain to me how or what Egypt.
I'm sorry, caller. You're going to have to ask your question again. We're having a little problem hearing you.
I was just going to wonder what role Egypt and Mr. Mubarak is playing in this whole affair.
What they're playing, or what they can play. What they're playing is there is no question that they are on the side of the PLO. Of course, this is true. I mean, they're not. It isn't as if Egypt is some outsider, an objective viewer, a fair person, an arbiter. Of course not. It's an Arab state, which is violently anti-Israel. One has to see the news media there, which is against state hatred of Israel, anti-Semitism there, the vulgar, base kind of anti-Israel cartoons and so on. They have no role to play. They have no role to play. There are two parties over here, Israel and the Palestinians, and there has to be face-to-face coverage. And I want to say something here. I've always been of the opinion that Israel should sit down with the PLO. Not because I like the PLO, but because the PLO represents the Palestinian people. Of course this is true. And by not sitting down with them, but saying we'll sit down with Jordan or with Syria, but not with the PLO, we have created this incredible delusion that there are moderate Arabs and extremist Arabs. There are no moderate Arabs. There are clever Arabs and stupid ones. The stupid ones say what they mean. The clever ones mean the same thing, but they've gotten clever about it. Sit down with the PLO and tell them no. You don't get anything from us. However, if you'd like to take over Jordan, we can help you. But that's about it. Sit down with them and tell them no. That's what has to be done.
Pat Chog, Long Island, New York. Good evening.
Yes. Hello, Rabbi Kahane.
Yes.
I'm a Palestinian, and I'd just like to know how come you disagree so much about us having our own state? You know, because my parents, right, are from that country. Mm-hmm. They own land, all our relatives, everyone lives there, and we're not allowed to go back.
Thank God.
Relatives.
Listen, your parents or your grandparents could have had their own state. In 1948, you could have accepted the UN partition plan. It would have given you Palestine. You went to war. You wanted to wipe out Israel. You live in America now. When you start something and you lose, you lose. Don't think it's some kind of a game whereby we'll start a war, we'll kill the Jews. If we lose it, we go back to go. No. You had an opportunity in 1948. Indeed, you had it until 1967. Until 1967, all the land of your parents and grandparents and cousins were in your hands. You went to war. You wanted a Tel Aviv too. You didn't get it. You lost. You're going to be taught a terrible lesson, and that is, don't kill us, because if you do and you lose everything.
Rabbi, we have about a minute left. You've told us your thoughts on these issues over the past 45 minutes, but what are the really realistic moves that we can see in the Middle East in the next year that you might predict?
Pressure on Israel. A Likud labor government which will give in to that pressure. That's what I see, leading to more and more tragedy, divisiveness inside Israel. I have to finish as a rabbi, because that's what I really, really am. I believe that the state of Israel is God's hand. People doesn't wander the earth for 2,000 years and it comes back exactly as the Bible says, just like that. There is a divine hand here. And if we do that which God wants, if the Jewish people will be the kinds of people that God wants and do what he wishes, then peace will come, salvation will come. If not, there will be terrible, terrible tragedy. And that's the kind of a thing that I want to avert. I don't want to kill Jews, and I don't want to kill Arabs. I wish we could both live together. I do not see it happening.
Rabbi Meir Kahane, former member of the Israeli Knesset, joining us this evening. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
We'll be back in just a few moments. Our guest, George Moses, he's president of the National Association of Arab Americans.
Get the scoop on C-SPAN's public affairs programming in advance with the C-SPAN Update. The Update is the weekly newspaper of America's network and details many